"I haven't seen a man in 17 years, said the tall settler woman, then hugged the young wandering cowboy and married her. A tall woman in a thick wool skirt swung the blade with a practiced grace, her breath rising in silver threads. Her braid, long and salt-streaked, whipped over one shoulder as she worked. There was strength in her arms, earned not from vanity but necessity, and her face, lined by sun and solitude, had the sort of beauty no man had ever stayed long enough to name. Adelaide Thorne hadn't spoken aloud in 4 days. A white-tailed buck watched from the tree line, unstartled, as if he knew her routines. She paused her work, one hand resting on the axe handle, and looked toward him. The silence between them was not empty, but sacred. Adelaide gave a faint nod. The buck flicked its ear and vanished deeper into the woods, as if content the world was still as it should be. She stepped back into her cabin and bolted the door behind her. The wind clawed at the shutters, but the hearth glowed steady. Inside, everything bore her handprint. Rough-sewn curtains, a rocking chair with a patchwork cushion, shelves of canned peaches and smoked meats. A home carved out of aloneness. Her fingers brushed the rim of a chipped enamel cup. 17 winters, she whispered, as if the walls had ears in memory. 17 winters since she'd watched the last man ride away and felt her own name buried beneath ridicule. Since she'd walked out of town and never looked back, the whispers of too tall and unwomanly trailing her like weeds. Since Hiram Boone's laughter at the barn dance, when she'd reached for his hand and he'd let the whole saloon watch her stumble. That night had ended her taste for men, not out of bitterness, just weariness, like a window nailed shut before the storm even arrives. A kettle hissed faintly on the stove. She moved to lift it, but paused when a gust of wind rattled the door harder than before. She glanced toward it, eyes narrowing. No one came this far. Not in a storm. Not in winter. Outside, the world was all white and sway, the wind dragging itself across the land like a wounded thing. Adelaide stood still for a moment, her hand resting on the table, pulse quiet but present. Then she walked to the window and lifted the edge of the curtain. There, in the snow, a shape, blurred, human, a horse. A rider slumped low in the saddle. The animal staggered under the weight, its sides lathered with frost. Adelaide's heart gave one hard thump. She dropped the curtain and reached for her father's rifle, not out of fear, but out of old habit. The man didn't move again, just sat hunched, like the snow had swallowed him alive while he was still breathing. Adelaide opened the door. Cold slapped her skin like a warning. She stepped out into the wind, boots sinking in deep. "You there," she called. Her voice cracked from disuse. "You lost." The rider stirred. Slowly. A young man, no older than 25, looked up, his face barely visible beneath the rim of a hat caked with snow. Lips blue, eyes dazed. He tried to speak, but only coughed. She dropped the rifle. "Off the horse," she barked. "Now." His knees buckled before he could obey. She caught him with arms made strong from lifting wood and hauling water, and dragged him inside without ceremony. The warmth hit him like a slap. He crumpled near the fire, breathing in shallow spurts, limbs trembling violently. She knelt beside him and began stripping the coat off his back, steam rising where ice met heat. The man didn't resist, just watched her through lashes wet with snowmelt. "Don't talk yet," she said. "You're frozen through." She pulled off his boots, toes red and raw. She wrapped his hands in wool towels, held them near the hearth. He stared at her, not out of alarm, but wonder, like he couldn't quite believe she was real. "I'll fetch broth," she muttered, rising quickly, more shaken by that look than she'd ever admit. He drank slow from a ladle, his hands clumsy but grateful. She crouched by the fire again, staring at him openly now. Young, clean-faced beneath the frost. Brown hair curling against his neck, dark with melted snow. A stitched rip across his sleeve. A locket peeking from his shirt. And around his neck, a leather string with a broken compass tied to it. The kind soldiers once carried westward with prayer and grit. "You running from something?" she asked. He met her gaze. "No, ma'am. Just walking toward something. I don't know what yet." His voice was soft, unpracticed like hers. Adelaide sat across from him, hands folded in her lap. The silence stretched again, this time gentler. Outside, the storm howled and tore at the roof like a wild thing. But inside, the fire held. "Name's Wyatt Mercer," he offered after a long while. She said nothing. Then, as if the words had been waiting years to rise, "Adelaide." He nodded, eyes drifting to the shelves she built, the walls she chinked, the life carved from exile. "You live here alone?" "Yes." "How long?" Her fingers tapped the edge of the table. 17 years. He blinked. "That long?" She held his gaze now, steady as a line drawn in snow. "I haven't seen a man in all that time. Not until you." The fire popped. His eyes didn't widen. He didn't laugh. Just took it in like weather. "Then I guess I'm honored," he murmured. She stood abruptly and turned away. "You'll need rest." "I'll be gone by morning," he said. "Didn't mean to trouble you." "You're not trouble," she said too fast, then regretted it. Her voice softened. "You'll stay till the storm breaks. That's all." He nodded, eyes fluttering shut. She watched the rise and fall of his chest. There was a strange ache in her ribs, like something had been knocked loose. A tension she hadn't noticed until it began to ease. The cabin, once so full of her silence, now felt too small for both of them, yet warmer, too. Later that night, she sat by the window as the wind curled its fingers across the glass. The deer returned to the edge of the clearing. She watched its silhouette, the long, proud neck, the stillness that mirrored her own. Behind her, Wyatt slept beneath firs, curled close to the fire. She whispered, "What are you here for, boy?" No answer, just the steady breath of sleep. Her eyes drifted to the hearth, where his coat lay drying. She crossed the room, picked it up carefully, and froze. Burned into the leather, above the inside pocket, were 3 small initials. "WM." She traced them with her fingertip. Then, beneath the initials, something even smaller, etched faint with a needle's patience. A compass rose. Faded, but there. She held the coat against her chest and stood very still. The snow outside thickened, swirling past the windows like ghosts unsure of where to land. Her heart thudded slow and strange. She hadn't invited a man in 17 years. And yet one had come, not shouting, not demanding, just half frozen, half lost, and holding a broken compass. As if the world had finally sent someone who wasn't trying to find her, but someone waiting to be found. The storm didn't pass that night, nor the next. Snow kept falling like time itself had slowed to a hush, covering everything in soft, white forgetfulness. Adelaide woke before dawn as always, but her body felt different, tense in unfamiliar ways. Her cabin, usually a cathedral of quiet routine, now held another breath, another presence. Wyatt was still there, curled near the hearth like a boy who'd wandered from a dream and hadn't yet returned. His boots, set by the fire, steamed faintly. His coat hung on the peg beside hers. 2 lives suddenly side by side. She moved with care, setting bread to rise and sweeping embers into the stove belly. Every motion felt observed, though his eyes remained closed. Even his sleep felt polite, as if he knew he was only borrowed by this place. When he stirred, it wasn't with a start, but a soft stretch. She didn't turn around until she heard him stand. "Smells like heaven in here," he murmured, voice still grainy with sleep. Adelaide glanced at him. The fire had brought some color back to his face, sun-browned under the pale of frostbite. His shirt clung to him in places where sweat had dried, and he rubbed his neck like a man unused to being idle. "You're warm now," she said. "That'll help." He nodded, taking in the light leaking through the shutters. "Still coming down out there?" "Harder than yesterday." He ran a hand through his hair, rough and dark, then stepped to the window. "Your tracks are already gone." "That's the thing about snow," she said softly. "It hides everything that ever happened." He looked at her then, but not everything that matters. Adelaide turned away too quickly, feigning interest in the kettle. They ate quietly, she at the table, he on the bench by the fire. Not because she demanded distance, but because he respected it. He didn't ask questions, didn't pry. Just watched the world outside her window like it was telling him something worth knowing. By midday, she found herself pulling on her coat and stepping outside. The snow rose to her calves. Her breath crystallized instantly. "You'll freeze," he said from the doorway, his voice light with concern. "I've done this 17 years, she replied. "The snow doesn't scare me." He followed anyway. They moved through the drifts, she ahead, him just behind, her steps certain, his curious. She didn't tell him where they were going. The path revealed itself with each step, a private trail tamped down by memory. A grove of cedar trees bowed heavy with ice, and in the center, a gravestone barely visible beneath a quilt of white. She knelt and brushed the snow away. The stone read, "Only Mother." No date. No name. "She died out here?" he asked gently. "She was born out here. Died the same way." She used to say some women are just made of hills and hardship. Wyatt crouched beside her. "She raise you alone?" "No," Adelaide said. "But she finished the job alone." He was quiet a moment, his breath curling in the cold. "And when she passed?" "I stayed." Her eyes were distant now, because there was no place else that didn't ask me to be smaller. He looked at her, not with pity, but with recognition. "You're taller than me." She half smiled. "That bother you?" "No, ma'am. It's kind of beautiful. Like the way cliffs are beautiful. You look at 'em and think, Lord, I'd fall if I got too close. But you can't stop looking either." The words hit her like warmth in deep winter. Her breath caught, but she didn't let it show. She rose first, brushing snow from her skirts. "Let's head back. Fire'll be low." They walked home in silence, not the kind born of discomfort, but one grown from something still unspoken. Each step left bootprints, his wide, hers deeper. He matched her stride without trying. Inside, she stirred stew while he sat whittling a piece of pine near the fire. The scent of cedar and broth curled between them. He worked with steady hands, the rhythm soothing. "You always carry a blade?" she asked. He glanced up. "My father's." He said no man should travel without one, nor marry without carving a ring first. Adelaide blinked, startled by how natural the word marry sounded in his mouth. He caught the shift in her expression. Didn't mean nothing by it. She shook her head. "I know." But the air had changed. Later, she poured water into a basin. "You can wash. There's linen on the shelf." He nodded his thanks, but hesitated. "What is it?" she asked. He stood, careful not to tower over her. "Most folks I meet don't offer water and cloth. Just suspicion. I'm not most folks. That's why I didn't ride on." She busied herself near the stove, but her ears caught every rustle as he peeled off his shirt. She glimpsed the scar first, just below his collarbone, long and pale. "Bullet?" she asked without looking. "Buckshot. Missouri." "Was it worth it?" He was quiet a long moment. "I thought I was fighting for someone who needed me. Turns out they just needed a body to throw in front." She turned around slowly. He stood bare-chested by the basin, back to her. The scar, the lean lines of his shoulder blades, the way his breath fogged in the cabin air, all of it struck her as startlingly human. No threat, no pretension, just a young man carved by the world and still walking through it anyway. "You don't have to stay past the storm," she said, finally. "I know, but you can." He turned to face her fully now. "Do you want me to?" She didn't answer, just moved to hang his shirt by the fire. Their fingers brushed. It was barely a touch, but she hadn't been touched in 17 years. Her heart slammed like a wild thing in her chest. She stepped back instinctively. "Forgive me," she whispered. "For what?" "For forgetting how it feels." He didn't move closer, just said, "Then remember slow. I'm not in a rush." She studied him. He didn't try to fill the silence, didn't try to fix her. He just let the moment stretch. Let her breathe. And for the first time in years, she did. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the roof beams, she listened to the wind rage against her walls. She listened for the creak of his chair by the fire, the soft clink of wood settling, the hush of snow piling high. He was still here. In the dark, she whispered into her pillow, "You don't scare me." And that, perhaps more than anything, was the first truth she'd spoken aloud in years. The next morning, she rose early again. The world outside was all white. But as she opened the door, she paused. There, leading from her threshold, were boot prints. Deep, steady, leading nowhere, and coming back again. The third morning broke with blue light spilling across the cabin floor, the kind of color that only snow and silence could make. Adelaide stood by the window, her palms resting flat against the wooden frame. Outside, the world gleamed, glazed white, every edge softened, every memory covered like a secret no longer needed. Wyatt was already splitting wood. She hadn't asked him to. He'd simply risen before dawn, pulled on his coat, and stepped out like he belonged to the rhythm of her world. His breath rose in clouds. His muscles coiled with every swing of the axe. He moved like he'd grown up learning the shape of labor, not chasing some grand ambition. Just survival, quiet and constant. The axe bit deep, chips flying. Adelaide watched the way his shoulders moved, steady, self-contained, and felt something stir beneath the ribs she had long ago sealed shut. She turned from the window, before she could name it. When he came inside, snow clinging to his boots, he offered a half-smile and dusted off his coat. "Stack you a cord by the smokehouse." "I saw," she said, trying to keep her voice even. "You didn't need to." "I know." He shrugged. "But I wanted to." The fire popped in the hearth. She ladled stew into 2 bowls and set them on the table, without ceremony. Wyatt sat, cradling his in both hands. He had a way of making simple things seem holy, like eating warm stew was a privilege, not a habit. Adelaide sat across from him. Their feet brushed beneath the table. Neither pulled away. "Where'd you learn to do all that?" she asked. "My uncle raised me after the war," took Pa. "He made his living fixing barns, chopping trees, hunting. I just followed him till I could do it faster." "You miss him." He nodded once. "He died in a winter like this one. We had no candles left, just firewood and grit." She stirred her stew slowly. "You talk about it like you already made peace with it." "I haven't," he said. "But if I let grief freeze me, I'd be buried next to him." Adelaide looked at the fire. "I buried my grief in work. Thought if I made this place strong enough, it'd keep the memories out. But they got in anyway." Wyatt leaned forward slightly. "What did you lose?" "My name mostly." Her voice caught. "My mother died. Then the town turned on me, said I was strange, called me a freak when I wouldn't marry Hiram Boone. He didn't like that." Wyatt's jaw tightened. "What did he do?" "Nothing a court would care about." She looked up, eyes steady now. "But he laughed at me in front of everyone. Made me feel like a creature, not a woman. I left that night. Never looked back." He said nothing for a moment. Then, quiet and clear, "That was brave." "No," she said. "It was shame." He shook his head. "I've known shame. Yours isn't that. Shame bows its head. But you've held yours up every day since." She opened her mouth, but no words came. Just breath. Just heat behind her eyes. "I know something about not belonging," he continued. "About being the one who walks alone. But it doesn't mean you're broken. It just means you've lasted." They didn't speak again until the bowls were empty. Later, she brought out her sewing, and he returned to the piece of pine he'd been whittling for days. He sat near the hearth, carving with steady strokes. The scent of wood mingled with smoke and snow. She caught herself glancing at him more than she ought to. His hands, weathered but precise. The curve of his smile when he managed a clean edge. The way he tucked one leg beneath him like a boy at peace. She missed him when he wasn't in the room, and that terrified her. As dusk thickened, Adelaide fetched a pail from the porch. The cold bit deep, sharper than it had been in days. She turned, only to see a shadow at the edge of the woods. A rider. She froze. The figure sat still, silhouetted by falling snow. Wyatt came to the door. "Adelaide." She didn't answer, just pointed. The man rode closer. As he came into view, her stomach turned. That gait, that posture, that smug lean in the saddle. "Hiram Boone," she whispered. He stopped a dozen paces from the porch, reined in his gelding, and gave her a slow, greasy smile. "Well, if it ain't the Snow Queen herself," he called. "Heard tell you had company." Wyatt stepped forward, jaw clenched. She's not interested in what you're selling. Hiram raised a brow. And who are you? A pup with a death wish. I'm someone who knows when a woman says no, it means no. Hiram's grin faded slightly. Careful, boy. You're on her land, not yours. I was invited. You weren't. Adelaide stood tall between them, her breath pluming into the air. What do you want, Hiram? Just passing through, he said. Curious is all. Word gets around. There's no word out here. There is when Lorna Jessup's tongue starts wagging. Seems you've taken in a little charity case. Wyatt's fists curled. Adelaide put a hand on his arm. Let him go. Wyatt stared at her, then stepped back. Hiram gave a mocking tip of his hat. Take care, Eddie. Wouldn't want the boy to melt when things heat up. He turned his horse and rode off, leaving nothing behind but hoof prints and the bitter scent of insult. Inside, Wyatt paced the cabin. He has no right to talk to you that way, he said. No man does. Adelaide sat by the fire, trying to steady her breath. He's always been like that. I just forgot how loud his shadow was. Wyatt knelt beside her. You don't have to take that. Not anymore. She looked down. I didn't want you to see me like this. Like what? Like someone who still gets scared. He reached for her hand. His fingers closed gently over hers, warm and certain. That doesn't make you weak. That makes you real. She met his eyes. For the first time, she let herself linger. You've been carving something, she said, trying to shift the moment. He nodded, pulled the whittled shape from his pack. It was small, imperfect, but unmistakably hers. A tall figure with long hair, standing straight as a pine. Her breath caught. Is that me? I wanted to remember how strong you looked, even when you didn't think anyone was watching. Her throat tightened. Why? He shrugged. Because things worth remembering don't always come with glory. Sometimes they come with grace. She held the carving in both hands like it might shatter. Thank you, she whispered. That night, she didn't light a second candle. She sat by the fire until it dimmed, staring into the fading red. Outside, the snow erased Hiram's tracks, but not the chill he'd left behind, and not the warmth of the carving in her hand. The snow lost its softness. It fell now like ash, thicker, heavier, soaked with ice, clinging to every branch and rooftop like it meant to stay. The wind no longer howled in song, but moaned like an animal caught in something it couldn't escape. When Adelaide stepped outside that morning, the world was iron gray, brittle with cold. She wrapped her shawl tighter, breath catching in the still air. Even the deer hadn't come. Inside, Wyatt was packing. His bedroll sat on the table, half folded. His satchel lay open, and his coat hung from a chair, his gloves resting beside it in perfect order. The carving of her, the small pinewood silhouette, was placed gently atop his journal, as if it were too sacred to forget, but too dangerous to keep. She stood in the doorway, boots dripping onto the floorboards. So you're leaving, she said quietly. He turned, startled. Not yet. Just preparing. Her chest tightened. For what? He exhaled slowly, voice low. In case you ask me to. She looked down at her gloves, took them off one finger at a time, folding them slowly. I didn't ask. No, he said. But I saw it in your eyes yesterday, after Boone left. She moved past him toward the hearth, tossed another log in. That wasn't about you. But it touched something in you, he said. Something I can't reach. She knelt, poked at the coals, trying to conjure more flame. You don't understand what it's like. He waited, silent, a steady presence that pressed without pushing. I've built a life from splinters, she said at last, piece by piece, with no one watching, no one believing. The minute someone sees me, really sees me, I forget how to stand. Boone reminded me that people don't forgive women like me. They just wait for us to fall again. Wyatt stepped closer. You haven't fallen. Not yet. Her voice cracked. But I'm tired of waiting to. He didn't respond right away. Just reached down and stirred the stew she'd forgotten on the stove, as if tending to something gave his hands reason to stay. I never came here to change you, he said gently. I just wanted to sit beside your fire. She turned to him. But I changed. He met her eyes. So did I. Her mouth opened, but no sound followed. She felt stripped bare, like the wind outside had crawled beneath her skin and taken every word she might have used to keep him distant. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "Not shelter, not kindness, not even goodbye. But you should know, every day I stayed here, I breathed easier. Not because I found a warm place, but because I found someone who built warmth where none existed." She blinked fast, her hands curled into fists at her sides. "You say all that, but you still packed." "Because I've lived in enough places where I wasn't wanted," he said. "Didn't want to risk staying too long in another." Adelaide crossed the room in 2 steps, stood in front of him, close enough to smell the wood smoke clinging to his shirt. "You think I don't want you here?" "I think you don't know how to say it," he said, eyes soft. Silence stretched, taut and trembling. She didn't reach for him, didn't touch his hand. She only whispered, "I don't know how to let someone stay without feeling like I'll lose everything I've built." "I'm not here to tear anything down," he murmured. "Just want to help carry what's already too heavy." Her breath hitched. The wind wailed against the windows like something lost. She felt the storm crawl inside her ribs. And for the first time, instead of bracing herself against it, she let it be. Wyatt took a step forward. Just one, close enough for their shadows to blend. "You said you haven't seen a man in 17 years, he said quietly. "What if the first one you saw was the one who stayed?" The ache in her chest bloomed wider. She wanted to speak, to let the gate open just enough. But the past was louder than her hope. "Don't say things you might take back when the snow melts," she said. "I won't," he answered, "because it wasn't the snow that brought me to you." That night they sat side by side, not speaking. Her hand rested close to his on the bench. Not touching, but nearly. He told her about the Missouri River, about sleeping under stars and chasing odd jobs from Texas to Dakota, about a dog he lost in Wyoming, and the uncle who used to hum church hymns in his sleep. Every story painted a life scraped raw, but never bitter. She told him nothing in return, but she listened like a woman starving. The storm worsened. A window cracked at the edge. Wind hissed through a splinter in the wall. Wyatt rose to patch it, candle in hand. She stood to help him, their shoulders brushing as they pressed burlap over the gap. Her cheek was so close to his. She could feel the heat of him, not fire heat, but something deeper. Steady, like belonging. "Would it ruin everything," she whispered, "if I asked you to stay?" He didn't answer with words. He simply placed his hand over hers, calloused, sure, and held it there. Not possessive, just present. They stood that way long enough for the candle to burn low. And when she finally pulled away, it was with a glance that said everything her mouth still couldn't. Later, alone in her bed, she stared at the rafters again. But this time, her hand rested against her chest where his had been. She didn't cry, but something unthawed in her. Something she wasn't sure how to name yet. Outside, the snow continued to fall. But the cold felt less like a curse now, and more like a chapter turning. In the morning, she found Wyatt outside again. Not packing, not waiting, building. He was hammering a beam against the shed wall that had long leaned crooked, nailing it true. She watched from the steps, arms crossed, heart thudding. He glanced up, gave her a smile, and returned to work like he'd always meant to, as if finally he had. And in that moment, standing barefoot on the porch with her braid whipping in the wind and the snow piling around her boots, she realized. The storm hadn't passed, but she no longer feared what it might take. Under the sharp light of the sky, trying to remember spring, the snow finally stilled. It didn't melt, not yet, but it softened, settled like it had been holding its breath and at last exhaled. The hills glistened, not with cruelty now, but with a hush that felt holy. Morning broke over the cabin roof, catching on frost-furred windows, and the smoke that curled up from the chimney like a thread from the soul of the house itself. Adelaide opened the door with bare hands. Wyatt was out there, same as every morning now. Not just passing time, not just repaying kindness, but fixing. His coat hung open at the collar, and his breath came in slow, fogging the cold between each hammer strike. He worked with the shed like it had wronged him long ago, and he meant to set it right. She watched him a moment, then stepped into the snow in her apron and shawl. You're always doing something, she said. He didn't look over. Work makes the day sit still. What does rest do then? He paused. Makes the heart louder. She smiled before she could stop it. He finally turned. The nails clenched between his teeth like a man mid-creation. He spat them into his palm. Got a few beams left. I'll finish today. You sure? Ma'am, he said, wiping his hands on his trousers. I've built 1,000 things. Never cared about any of them. This one, I want done right. She stepped closer, boots crunching lightly over frozen earth. Her gaze dropped to the ring of shaved wood and metal he'd used to brace the planks, silent evidence of his ingenuity, of how he took the broken and found ways to bind it whole again. You ever think about leaving? She asked. Going back south? He leaned on the hammer. Sometimes. But you're still here. His eyes lifted to hers, slow and steady. I'm still waiting for something. The wind pulled at the trees. The sun winked out behind a passing cloud. She whispered, "What?" He took a breath, then moved past her, back toward the cabin. You'll know when it's time. That afternoon, they cooked together. It started with her handing him flour, then letting him slice the lard. He moved awkward at first, like a boy trying not to ruin something sacred. But she guided his hands, taught him how to pinch the dough, how to listen for the right sizzle in the skillet. His laughter came out clumsy but honest. And when she brushed flour from his cheek with the back of her knuckle, neither of them flinched. They shared the meal beside the hearth, shoulder to shoulder on the bench. Wyatt pulled something from his coat pocket. It was small, wrapped in an old kerchief. He set it between them like a confession. She looked at it, but didn't move to touch it. I found this when I was 15, he said. Left behind in a saddlebag with a box of matches and a pocket knife. Belonged to a man my father rode with. Said he was a good man. Died bad, but not because he wanted to. She gently unfolded the cloth. Inside lay a brass compass, scarred, aged, the glass chipped on one side. A thin leather cord was knotted through the hinge. Dangling from that cord was a ring, carved from antler, smooth, pale, imperfect. Adelaide's breath hitched. I kept it because I thought it might lead me somewhere, he continued. But I've come to believe it was never pointing to a place, just waiting for the right person to stop long enough for it to settle. She looked up at him. Her face, usually so composed, was undone now, eyes wide, unguarded. You made this, she whispered, lifting the ring. He nodded. For me. He didn't answer with words, just nodded once more, firmer. She held the ring in her palm like something fragile and holy. The heat of the fire made the antler glow faintly golden. I don't know how to be a wife, she said softly. I don't know how to need someone without fearing they'll disappear. Wyatt took her hand, steady and sure. Then don't be a wife, he said. Be Adelaide Thorne, the woman who made a life from splinters. I'll be lucky just to stand beside her. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Do you understand what you're choosing? She asked. A woman who's older, who's been called strange, who don't know how to hold someone without shaking. I understand, he said, that I've never felt more at home than I do here. Not because of the roof, but because of you. Silence folded between them like linen over a gift. And then, slow and sure, she lifted the compass and slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit, not perfectly, but like it belonged there all the same. Later, as twilight fell, she found herself standing by the cedar grove where her mother's grave slept under the snow. Wyatt stood a few paces behind, hands in his pockets, boots rooted. She always wanted to see me married, Adelaide said quietly. But she never said I had to do it young, just had to do it right. She'd be proud, Wyatt said. Adelaide knelt, placed a single pine cone beside the stone. She'd laugh, she murmured. Say, took you long enough, girl. Wyatt stepped beside her. Then let's not waste any more time. That night, under the silver hush of a winter sky, they stood on the porch, bareheaded, breath steaming, hearts thudding slow and full. No preacher, no paper, just their hands joined between them. Her ring glowing faint in the moonlight, his thumb brushing the edge of it like a vow he'd carry in his blood. I want you, she whispered. Then I'm yours, he answered. They kissed once. Not deep, not wild, but real, like touching the edge of spring at the end of a long frost. When they stepped back inside, the fire had dimmed, but the warmth remained. In the days that followed, no grand changes occurred. They built a new shed door. They made biscuits in silence and planted the first of the winter seeds. Wyatt carved her another figure, this one laughing, arms outstretched. Adelaide added a quilt square to the bed she'd always slept in alone. And at night, when the wind rose, she reached for him instinctively. Not out of fear, but out of love. Weeks later, Lorna Jessup rode by with a parcel. Her eyes narrowed when she saw two shadows through the window. She made no comment, just handed Adelaide the tin of coffee and rode off, cheeks tight with things unsaid. Adelaide didn't flinch. She closed the door, smiled to herself, and pressed the tin into Wyatt's hands. "You ever had strong coffee?" He smirked. "Only the kind that tastes like burnt dirt. Then you'll love this." They drank it at the table. She watched him sip, the way his lashes dipped low over his cheeks, the slow curl of his lip at the aftertaste. He winced. She laughed, openly, for the first time in years. That laugh stayed with him. And long after the snow began to melt, long after boots no longer sank and deer wandered close again, Wyatt still swore that laugh was what made the compass finally stop spinning. It didn't point north anymore. It pointed home. And that ring, carved from what was once horn and hardship, held not just a finger but a promise. That even after 17 years of silence, a heart could still speak, could still choose, could still be chosen. And when that happened, when shame and fear finally surrendered to grace, what once felt like a long, cold sentence turned into the warmest kind of beginning. A quiet vow, a place to rest, a fire that never burned out, and a love that needed no ceremony, only staying,